Hi everyone, Glenn here, talking about the Wine and War project with Jim Kimball, professor at SUNY Geneseo of music history, ethnomusicology, and and we're talking about some of the main characters that are bubbling up out of the research of the show, and one of them is going to be a fiddler called Ed Peterson, okay, who is going to function almost as a narrator in the show. He himself was a Civil War veteran and came home and had a long life after his service in the Union Army. Also a musician too. So I've asked Jim to tell us a little bit about who Ed Peterson was.
Edward Garrett Peterson. His birthday is just a little bit uncertain. I think he got a little bit older as the years went on in terms of claiming that the 1850 census says he was 3 years old and a family with many children. His father's name was Pete Peterson, born in 1811, maybe. By the time we get to the 1920s, he's being described as the last of the old-time fiddlers and callers. And he's African-American, in a farming family out in Leicester, not too far from Harlan's family. And he was playing before the Civil War, some at least that he describes in his own history. When he was 16, he played at a house party. That would be just before he signed up, maybe lying about his age to get into the Civil War, maybe in December of 1863 through the end of the war. Following, I think, two older brothers, and two of his brothers did not come back. Were killed or died in the South. Pete was apparently a great gardener. We've got a nice description of that. Worked as a farmhand for a while, and by 1880, I think he bought land maybe in Collierville. And by 1900, he's living in Geneseo, and then we hear a whole lot more about them. The newspaper, local folks really enjoyed Old Pete, as they called him, who could play all the old standard dances, the old contra dances, Money Musk, opera reel, Virginia reel. And as he says, my quadrilles were as good as anybody's. And his one famous quadrille, the newspaper comments on the Wadsworth Hose quadrille, heads right and left and side sashay. The newspaper quotes that. And it had two fiddlers and one veteran dancer player sing that tune to me because they remembered it. So he certainly played the house parties. He played all over the area, which was, didn't make the newspaper, but the kind of thing he would say. His early days, his homemade fiddle was a homemade fiddle completely with homemade strings and everything. But by the time he was playing dances, he was often by himself, standing in the corner all night long until 5 in the morning. The dances back then. We've got a wonderful quote from 1927 when he has an orchestra, and they play till 4 in the morning. And he's already in his 80s, and the paper says how much energy he generated in that dance as people wanted to hear the old fiddler do his thing, Old Pete. Or, as described in a couple of the newspaper headings, like he's playing for a Catholic church dance. Where was it? Pavilion, I think. So, Professor E.G. Peterson, which was often appended to the name of the leader of an orchestra, or the man who could teach dancing. Professor.
Wow. So now you mentioned that there's fiddlers today that play some of the same tunes that Ed Peterson played.
Certainly, those are standard old-time tunes. Nobody dances the Wadsworth Hose quadrille anymore without some teaching. One could do it. We know how it was done pretty much. Occasionally, a contra dance group might do Money Musk. We do Virginia reels in our band routinely. So some of those we don't know all the tunes he played. He says, oh, the first tune he ever played on his homemade fiddle was Old Dan Tucker. Well, that's still a rather well-known song. Out of minstrelsy in the old days, but there was a dance that Clarence Mayer and others said, oh, we always did the dance to Old Dan Tucker with an odd gentleman in the middle. That was Old Dan, and a circle of couples around the outside. And somehow everybody takes turn being the odd person in the middle.
Well, what's exciting to me, okay, not only as the composer of this new folk opera, but also as a person who grew up here, because as a little boy, when I was going to the square dances over at the Yorktown Hall, the tunes that you're talking about were being played there, right? And so there's a wonderfully visceral connection that I have to Ed Peterson.
There's certainly a few of his tunes that were so standard that they're still played. The Turkey in the Straws and Old Dan Tucker and others, perhaps. They're not part of contemporary square dance, but they're part of the repertoire of anybody that plays fiddle tunes, banjo tunes. He had family members. He was playing by himself until he had children that started. He got married around 1870 to 1872, and his older boy played cornet, I think. He had a daughter that played either piano or pump organ, depending on what you had. And a little later in life, he certainly had white musicians that played with him as well as black musicians.
Yeah.
And one of the descriptions says, well, he played every town in Livingston County and all the bordering towns around Livingston County. So that tune, Heads Right and Left Inside Sachet, we have from Mark Hamilton, who lived just south of Livingston County and Allegheny County, and Clarence Mayer, that lived up near just north of Caledonia. He played that tune as they learned it from older musicians.
Well, I'm planning on using a lot of these tunes in the show. Okay, and dancing will be dancing and dance music will be an important part of retelling the story of the Warren family and their winery and also Harlan's experience of coming home as a Civil War veteran.
Where or if Harlan ever heard Ed Peterson, he might well have, if he lived within maybe 3 miles or so, at house parties. But Peterson, certainly in time, we can document, the papers say, well, he played for Catholic churches. That was quite common. The Catholics liked to dance. He played for veterans organizations, for fire companies, for all manner of any event, various fraternal groups. He would play dances. I don't know, might have been at one or the other of those.
Well, I would actually think there's a pretty good chance because Harlan's family, okay, going back to his father Samuel, they were civically active, doing lots of things, and of course their winery was producing communion wine. Okay, right. So he would have had a direct connection with Catholic churches and as well. So I have a hunch that they probably knew each other. Good. Thank you for telling us a bit about Ed Peterson here, and so when folks are listening to the music of the show, they can be listening for some of these tunes and looking for his character. So, thank you.